Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever played a strategy video game, you have almost certainly seen his name. It's usually right there, written in these bold, proud letters on the physical or digital box. We're talking Sid Meier's Civilization, Sid Meier's Pirates, Sid Meier's Railroad Tycoon. For literally decades now, computer programmer and designer Sid Meier has been one of the most legendary creators in the entire software industry. But, have you ever stopped to wonder why his name actually precedes his creations? It's kind of wild when you think about it. In an industry where thousands of people can work on a single title, how did one programmer from Michigan become this massive marquee brand, on par with a famous author or a big-time Hollywood director? Well, today, we're going to explore the central mystery of that branding, look at the rapid rise of his career, and decode the incredibly strict design methodology that makes his games so notoriously hard to put down.
Okay, let's dive into this. The whole idea of auteur branding in video games, where a single creator's name is the primary selling point, is extremely rare. Honestly, it almost never happens. But back in the 1980s, when Sid Meier co-founded a company called Microprose with Bill Steely, this became the defining feature of his career. And what's super interesting is that it wasn't born out of some massive ego trip. By 1986, Microprose was already using Meier's name and face in advertisements, mainly just hoping to attract other developers by promoting him as a star creator. But the very first game to actually feature his name as part of the official title, that didn't happen until 1987. And it came about because of a surprisingly hilarious twist of fate involving a very, very famous celebrity.
And that celebrity was none other than comedian Robin Williams. The inciting incident took place at a dinner for a Software Publishers Association meeting. Microprose co-founder Bill Steely recalled that Williams was just hanging out there, keeping them in absolute stitches for 2 hours. During that dinner, Williams turns to Steely and directly suggests putting Sid's name on the boxes to promote him as the star. At the time, Meier had just developed a game called Pirates, which was a massive departure from the flight simulators Microprose was known for. Steely realized, hey, if we slap Meier's name on this entirely new genre of game, it'll signal to the hardcore fans of his flight simulators that this new title is for sure worth trying. And boom, just like that, Sid Meier's Pirates was born.
Now, to really understand how we got to that point, we kind of have to flash back to his education. In 1975, Meier graduated from the University of Michigan. What's absolutely fascinating here is the combination of his studies. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in computer science, but he also studied history. Now, at the time, these might have seemed like two completely different, totally unrelated fields, right? One is deeply technical and forward-looking, and the other is deeply human and past-facing. But this combination perfectly foreshadowed his world-building future. It's like he was acquiring the exact toolset needed to eventually simulate human history through computer code.
And this brilliantly illustrates how unexpectedly a career can pivot. Because following college, Meier's day job was far from glamorous. He literally worked developing cash register systems for department stores. But what happened next changed the entire trajectory of his life. Around 1981, he gets his hands on an Atari 800. And just by tinkering with it, he realized the massive, totally untapped potential for using computer programming to create video games. He ended up finding a coworker with a similar interest, Bill Steely, and shared the games he'd been making on his own time. Recognizing the explosive growth of the software and personal computer industries in the early 1980s, they decided to leap into the unknown. They established their own game company, Microprose, in 1982.
So that takes us right into from registers to flight sims.
Moving into the early days of Microprose, Meier's creative output was just staggering, but it definitely took a specific direction early on. Initially, he made a few 2D action games and platformers, like this one called Floyd of the Jungle. But very quickly, the company found its footing in a much more complex arena, vehicle and flight simulations. And we can map his rapid ascension and dramatic shift in genres here. I mean, just 1 year after getting that Atari 800, he designed and programmed Hellcat Ace. Then he immediately followed that up with Spitfire Ace, Solo Flight, and F-15 Strike Eagle. Now, during this era, Meier insisted on doing absolutely everything himself. The programming, the sound, even the art, the whole shebang. He did that until he was finally persuaded to let an artist help with 1985's Silent Service. Then, by 1987, as we talked about, he pivoted to the swashbuckling adventure of pirates, and eventually by 1991, he released the game that would define his legacy forever. But why? Why did he abandon the highly successful flight simulators that actually made his company rich in the first place?
Well, this quote explains it perfectly.
After releasing F-19 Stealth Fighter, Meier completely shifted his focus over to strategy games. He simply stated that everything he thought was cool about a flight simulator had already gone into that specific title. He felt he had utterly exhausted the creative possibilities of the genre. He needed a new challenge, right? A broader canvas. He wasn't interested in just making these tiny, incremental updates year after year. He wanted to simulate entirely new systems from the ground up.
Which perfectly tees up building a civilization. That deep desire for a broader canvas led him to draw inspiration from games like SimCity and Empire, eventually creating Sid Meier's Railroad Tycoon. But it was his next project that fundamentally changed the gaming landscape forever. A turn-based strategy masterpiece where players literally guide an empire from the dawn of humanity straight into the space age. To put the impact of this into perspective, 73 million. That is the staggering scale of his cultural footprint. As of August 2024, the Civilization franchise has sold over 73 million copies. It's a wildly successful franchise that has spanned decades and multiple sequels. It completely cemented his reputation as one of the most influential game designers of all time. Truly, it's a masterclass in how designing complex, open-ended systems can capture human imagination for generations.
But here is a truly fascinating piece of irony for you. Despite his name being the primary marketing tool for the entire franchise, Meier was actually only the lead designer for the very first installment. No way, right? It's true. For example, Brian Reynolds led Civilization 2, Jeff Briggs designed Civilization 3, and Soren Johnson led Civilization 4. Even later titles were led by incredibly talented designers like John Schaefer, Will Miller, and David McDonough. Meier basically passes the baton. He builds the foundation, establishes the core mechanics, and then empowers other designers to take the helm, even while his name proudly remains on the box.
And because of this incredible track record, his name evolved from what started as a quirky marketing gimmick suggested by Robin Williams into a literal seal of quality. By 1992, Computer Gaming World magazine was already praising his name on a box as a guarantee they got it right. The community basically knew that if Sid Meier was in the title, the game had passed through an incredibly rigorous filter of design philosophy, absolutely regardless of who the lead designer was on that specific iteration.
Okay, let's jump ahead to the Firaxis era. As we reached the late 90s, the landscape of the gaming industry really began to shift. Microprose had become a public company and eventually emerged with Spectrum Holobyte in 1993. By 1996, Spectrum initiated a bunch of cost-cutting measures and consolidated their operations. While totally dissatisfied with these corporate decisions, Meier, along with his colleagues Jeff Briggs and Brian Reynolds, made a super bold move. In 1997, they left Microprose behind entirely to form a brand new company, Firaxis Games. This move allowed Meier to get back to exactly what he loved, focusing purely on the games without the friction of a massive corporate overhead. And the Firaxis era allowed him to explore some incredibly unique creative tangents, way outside of pure strategy gaming. For instance, Meier was granted a 1996 patent for a system for real-time music composition and synthesis. He actually used this in a title for the 3DO gaming console called CPU Bach. It was a program designed to continuously generate musical compositions in the style of Bach without ever duplicating itself. Now, while it was a commercial failure, it perfectly highlights his polymath nature and his absolute obsession with using code to generate complex, endless variations of art.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the philosophy of fun. So the crucial point is his ruthless editorial filter. As reported way back in 1994, his primary rule is to emphasize the fun parts of a simulation and literally throw out the rest. If a mechanic is realistic but tedious, it gets cut, gone. It's a ruthless filter that any creator, whether you're coding software or writing a presentation, can apply. If it's not engaging, cut it. Second, he designs by playing the game over and over and over until it is fun. He has stated that discovering that elusive quality of fun is actually the toughest part of the whole design process. Finally, despite his games frequently dealing with violent periods in human history or heavy warfare, he has a strict constraint. There is never any blood or gore shown. The focus is always strictly on the high-level strategy and the joy of system building, never on visceral violence.
And he holds himself to these constraints relentlessly. Actually, scratch that, it's more like obsessively. For example, in early 2000, Meier started working with a team on a dinosaur-themed game. They tried everything. They built real-time prototypes, they built turn-based prototypes, but by 2001, he announced in an online development diary that the game was officially shelved. Why? Simply because despite trying various approaches, he found no way to make the concept fun enough. He flat out wouldn't release a game that didn't meet his internal standard for engagement, even if he deeply loved the core concept.
Which leads us to one of the most fascinating details about how Sid Meier works today. He doesn't start by building massive teams or writing these huge pitch decks. He starts with the code. And it turns out he has a bit of a secret weapon.
So I pose this question to you. What secrets do you think remain in a prototype engine that he has been quietly updating for over 20 years?
Get this. According to Firaxis employees, Meier has been constantly developing a special, proprietary game engine since around 1996. He doesn't share it with anyone. It is widely believed to be based on his original Civilization source code, just expanded over the decades with constant updates. As recently as 2016, senior producer Dennis Shirk revealed that Meier will still sometimes just arrive at the office and casually announce he has a brand new game prototype for the company to try out, all built in this private software. It really leaves you wondering, in that personalized, totally unshared engine, what hidden masterpieces might he still have locked away right now, waiting to be perfected until they are finally, undeniably fun?